Scandal at 30,000 feet. A flight attendant's forbidden affair with a pilot her father's age. The calm, authoritative voice echoed through the terminal at JFK International, announcing the imminent departure of Flight 320 to San Francisco. Clara, a young lead flight attendant with sharp eyes and a weariness that clung to her like the static of a long-haul flight, emerged from the briefing room, even exhausted. Her professionalism was a shield. Clara had a slender grace, not a show-stopping beauty, but she possessed a captivating presence. For nearly 3 years, she had been a ghost, flawless in her service, never the subject of a single complaint, and completely untouched by the rampant rumors of pilot-attendant affairs that were a staple of the industry. But today's flight felt different, unsettling. The captain was Arthur Vance, a man the younger attendants joked about, saying if he were 20 years younger, he'd be an unstoppable force. At 58, he was one of the airline's most seasoned pilots, tall and imposing, his hair flecked with silver, but his eyes were still sharp, and his deep voice held a commanding charm. Clara had never flown with him before. She knew him only by reputation, a paragon of discipline. Strict but fair, she stepped into the cockpit to greet him, her professional smile perfectly in place. But when her eyes met his, her heart, for the first time in years, skipped a beat. "Good morning, Captain. I'm Clara, your lead attendant for Flight 320. "Morning, Clara. I've heard good things. Just run your cabin. You'll be fine," he said with a slight smile. His voice was just deep enough, just warm enough, to feel safe. In that single glance, she felt an inexplicable familiarity, a sense of calm that unnerved her. It wasn't infatuation. It was the unnerving feeling of being seen, as if his experienced eyes saw right through the fatigue she hid so well. Throughout the 5-hour flight, Clara performed her duties flawlessly, but the image of Captain Vance lingered in her mind, his steady hands on the controls, his deep eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. When the plane landed smoothly in the hazy San Francisco afternoon, he paused by the door as passengers deplaned. "Thank you, Clara," he said quietly. "In 30 years of flying, that was one of the most pleasant flights I've ever had." Clara could only stare as his silhouette disappeared, her hand instinctively pressed against her chest. Was this the beginning of something? The crew was taken to a hotel near SFO for the overnight layover. It was a life of transient luxury and profound loneliness. In her room, Clara stared out at the distant city lights and thought of his words. Why did a simple compliment feel so significant? She shook her head, chiding herself. He's more than 30 years older than me. He has a family. It was impossible. But her heart wasn't listening. Just then, her phone buzzed. A text from her second in command. "Someone in the lobby wants to buy you a drink." "Guess who?" Clara frowned. "Mark, the first officer." The reply came back. "Nope. The captain." Clara's hand trembled slightly. In the bathroom mirror, her cheeks were flushed. The hotel's ground floor had a quiet, classic bar. Arthur was already there, dressed in a simple light blue shirt, looking thoughtful. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to a chair. "I didn't want to bother you, but it felt like a waste to enjoy this view alone." "Thank you, Captain Arthur," he corrected gently. "Off the clock. We're just people." Slowly, they began to talk, not as captain and flight attendant, but as two lonely souls. Clara spoke of her mother, who had remarried when she was 10. He spoke of near misses in the sky and a quiet divorce no one knew about. "I have a son," he said, his gaze dropping. "He lives with his mother. He must be about your age now." Clara's heart ached with a strange empathy. At 11, as they parted by the elevators, Arthur said something that made her freeze. "Clara, I don't know what the future holds, but thank you for listening. It's rare to find someone who makes me feel this at ease." The doors closed, leaving her staring into space, her heart fluttering. For the first time, she was looking forward to her next flight, not for the destination, but for the person. Back in her small apartment in Brooklyn, the first thing she saw was a private message in her work inbox from Captain Arthur Vance. The subject line was short. "If you're willing, I'd like to see you again." Her mind screamed no, the age gap, the gossip, the scandal. But her fingers betrayed her. Typing a short reply. If you're sincere, I'll be there. You pick the place. That Saturday, in a quiet cafe near Central Park, they met. They didn't talk about work or age. They were just two people who had weathered their own storms, now finding warmth in a shared coffee and a sincere gaze. I know I have more years, more baggage, and more scars than you, he said, his voice low and earnest. But I've never felt the sense of peace I feel when I'm with you. I'm not afraid of your past, she replied. I'm afraid my future won't be brave enough for us. A strange, unspoken connection began to form between them. It was quiet, secret, but powerful. They rarely texted or called, but whenever she saw his name on a flight roster, her heart would stir like a teenager's. One mid-month evening, on a flight from JFK to Bangkok, they were assigned to the same crew. After the plane reached cruising altitude, she went to the galley for some water. A familiar voice startled her. Do you always get this tired on the night flights? Arthur was standing there, his gaze just as calm and gentle as the first time they met. If you need someone to listen, I can be that person, he said slowly. The air in the galley grew thick with unspoken words. Clara stood frozen. She knew, with terrifying certainty, that she was falling in love. And maybe, so was he. As the car service pulled up to her street in Brooklyn, Arthur said unexpectedly, I want to take you somewhere. Not a coffee shop. Not a hotel. I want to walk with you through Greenwich Village. A place I once went with my ex-wife, but never once felt happy. Clara turned to him, seeing a profound loneliness hiding behind his weathered features. If I go, it means I'm accepting a world where people will judge us. I don't need an answer now, he said. But if there's ever a moment you don't feel lonely, even for just a few hours because of me, then call. 3 days later, after back-to-back flights to Kuala Lumpur and Seoul, Clara returned home near midnight. As she opened her door, she froze. A figure was sitting under the tree at the end of her block. It was Alex, her ex-boyfriend, the man who had shattered her heart by cheating with her best friend 2 years ago. Clara, I've been waiting for you. Alex's voice trembled. I was wrong. I just want one more chance. Clara was silent. The image of Arthur, his kind eyes, his patience flashed in her mind. She realized the man in front of her had never once given her peace. I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago, Alex, and I don't need a man just because I'm afraid of being lonely, she replied softly, turning and walking away, leaving him stunned in the darkness. That night, she pulled a small piece of paper with familiar handwriting from her wallet. She hesitated, then dialed the number. After 3 rings, Arthur's deep, gentle voice answered. Hello. Clara smiled, her own voice thick with emotion. If your offer still stands, I'd like to take that walk with you. No coffee shops. No hotels. Just a walk. There was a pause on the other end. I'm waiting for you on Bleecker Street, he finally said. I brought 2 black and white cookies and a flask of hot tea. A teary smile spread across Clara's face. Then I'm coming. But don't you go anywhere. I'm afraid of getting lost again. At midnight, the village was quiet, under the golden glow of the streetlights. Their 2 shadows stretched long on the cobblestones. The distance between them had vanished. For the first time in years, Clara felt truly alive in her own skin. And her greatest fear was no longer the age gap, but the thought of losing this feeling again. Their relationship grew in the quiet moments between long flights, a cup of tea in a hidden cafe, a quick meal on a peaceful side street. Theirs was a love story without loud declarations, but it resonated deeply in both their hearts. Arthur never made grand promises, but with him, she felt utterly safe. But beautiful things are rarely left in peace for long. One afternoon, returning from a flight from Miami, Clara overheard 2 colleagues whispering, Did you hear? Clara's seeing Captain Vance. Seriously. Has about to retire. He's old enough to be her father. Someone saw them walking around the Central Park Reservoir. Clara froze, her heart clenching. She walked away quickly, pretending she'd heard nothing. But the words were like needles. That night, she sent Arthur a short text. Do you have any regrets for choosing me? A few minutes later, he replied. My only regret is not meeting you sooner. Clara burst into tears. She didn't need a promise of forever. She just needed one person who wouldn't let go of her hand in the storm. The storm, however, was just beginning. 2 days later, she was summoned by HR. Clara, a senior manager, said sternly. We've received complaints about an inappropriate relationship you're having with a superior, Captain Vance. This reflects poorly on the airline's image. You are suspended from flying for 1 week pending an investigation. She felt the floor drop out from under her. That night, when Arthur called, she didn't answer. She was terrified he would be disciplined. His 30-year legacy tarnished because of her. But just as she hit her lowest point, there was a knock on her door. It was Arthur. He said nothing, simply handed her a stack of papers. It was his letter of resignation. He looked at her, his eyes sad but resolute. I won't let you stand alone in this, and I won't let our love become a burden for you. But you'll lose everything, she choked out. No, he replied. I'm only leaving a position. You're the life I want to keep. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. That night, she went to his apartment for the first time. It was in an old pre-war building on the Upper West Side, filled with books and faded photographs. Her eyes landed on one particular frame, a young man in a sharp suit at some event. She picked it up instinctively. That's my son, Arthur said from behind her, a note of pain in his voice. His name is Alex. Clara went rigid, a shock running through her entire body. What? What did you just say? She stammered. His name is Alex. Has 29 this year, he said, not noticing her ghastly expression. She stumbled back, staring at the photo. Those eyes. That face. It was him. It was the same Alex who had cheated on her. The cruel irony felt like a physical blow. What's wrong? Arthur asked, alarmed by her trembling. Clara looked at him, her eyes red. My ex-boyfriend. His name is also Alex. And that face. That's him. The air left the room. Arthur stared at her, then sank into a chair, speechless. I didn't know. I truly had no idea. A week later, Alex called her, demanding to meet. His eyes were cold and calculating. I know who you're seeing. That's my father, he said. If you know what's good for you, you'll leave him. Is that a threat? She asked, her voice sharp. He smirked. It's a warning. If our past gets out, what do you think will happen to your career? A flight attendant sleeping with the father of the ex who cheated on her. Clara's fists clenched. But she didn't cry. She stood up and looked him straight in the eye. I was weak then. So I let you hurt me. I'm not afraid anymore. If you want a war, let's go. I've already lost everything once. I have nothing left to lose. She walked away, leaving Alex stunned. The girl he had broken was gone, replaced by a woman ready to fight for her love. She left the cafe with determined steps, but her heart was in turmoil. That evening, Arthur called her first. Clara. I know, he said, his voice heavy with a sigh. Not accusation. I saw Alex today. He told me everything. There was a pause. What are you thinking? I hurt, he said. Not because you knew him, but because after all these years as a father, I never truly understood my own son. I know he resents me for leaving his mother, but I never imagined he would choose to hurt people this way. Clara finally broke down, realizing Arthur was the one in the most pain. I don't want you to lose your son because of me. Listen to me. His voice grew firm. I didn't lose Alex because of you. He lost me a long time ago when he chose to live a life of selfishness. You, Clara, you are the only reason I feel like I'm living a real life at all. 2 days later, she received a text from an unknown number. Meet me. I won't watch my father be ruined by a girl like you. The old cafe. 9 p.m. Alex. She decided to go. This had to end. Do you really think you're worthy of being in my family? He sneered. Clara met his gaze. I'm not trying to be in your family. I am entering a man's life as a grown woman who isn't begging or fighting for a spot. So what's next? A wedding. So the whole world can laugh at my father for marrying someone his son's age. If people laugh, It's because they've never known real love, she retorted. I'm not afraid of being laughed at. I'm afraid of losing the one person who is truly sincere with me. You never loved me, Alex. You only loved yourself. With him. He knows when I'm sad without me having to say a word. The words hit their mark. Alex fell silent. Before she left, Clara said one last thing. From now on, you will stay out of my life and your father's life. Because I will not back down. That night, Arthur texted her. Thank you for being braver than I ever could have been. If you'll still have me, I will never let you go. Just when they thought the storm might pass, a new player emerged. It was Alex's mother, Arthur's ex-wife, Catherine, a retired university lecturer. She called Clara one afternoon. You must be Clara. My name is Catherine. Alex's mother. I think you and I should talk. Woman to woman. They met at a chic lounge in Midtown. Catherine was elegant and composed. Her eyes held no contempt. But they were guarded. I'll be direct, she said, her voice smooth as silk. Are you truly serious about this relationship? Yes, I am, Clara answered, her voice unwavering. I came to Arthur for no other reason than his kindness and the way he makes me feel. Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then her voice softened. Arthur and I had what everyone thought was a perfect marriage. But we drifted apart. Not because of a third person. But because I grew tired of being married to a man whose true partner was his career. I don't blame him. But when I saw him willing to give up that 30-year career for a woman, I realized. He probably never loved me the way he loves you. The words left Clara speechless. But Alex is my son, Catherine continued. And he is hurt. He cannot accept this. I don't intend to break anything apart, Clara said, trying to remain calm. I am simply following my heart after a great deal of pain. Catherine stood up. If you ever realize that love sometimes requires you to stop at the right time, remember this conversation. She left, leaving Clara alone, but not weakened. That evening, Arthur came to her. Catherine and I grew distant, he said. But I know she has always felt left behind. I'm afraid you're feeling that pressure now. Clara squeezed his hand. I'm not afraid of her judgment. I'm only afraid of a day when you might choose silence instead of defending the person by your side. He looked at her with gratitude. I'm not young enough to start over. But if I have 10 more years to live, I want to live with you. With all the sincerity and kindness I have. She rested her head on his shoulder. She was in love with a man who had made mistakes, but who now knew how to hold on to the one right thing in his life. The peace was short-lived. A few days later, an anonymous post appeared on a notorious online gossip blog, complete with candid photos of Clara and Arthur. The headline was venomous. Airline scandal. Flight attendant in affair with captain pushing 60. Who happens to be her cheating ex-boyfriend's father. Is it love? Or a gold-digging scheme? The story went viral. The comment section was a cesspool of judgment. The news reached Clara as she was preparing for a training flight. Her face went pale. Her hands trembling. Her quiet, principled life was being torn apart for public consumption. She felt the whole world turn against her. But at her lowest moment, Arthur fought back. On his old, long-dormant Facebook profile, he wrote a single, dignified post. My name is Arthur Vance, a former airline captain. I am confirming that Clara and I are in a serious, committed relationship. There is no scheme. And nothing immoral has occurred. If the public needs someone to hold accountable, direct your words at me. But if someone is using this situation to hide their own wrongdoing, I suggest they stop before they themselves are exposed. Public opinion split. Then, the unexpected happened. Another young woman left a long comment on the original blog post, complete with screenshots of texts and wire transfers. Another woman Alex scammed. He borrowed a large sum of money from me and then ghosted me. Now he's using his old relationship to slander someone else. What right does he have to play the victim? The new information spread like wildfire. The tide turned instantly. The original post was quietly deleted. That night, Arthur held her tightly. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner, Clara cried. Not from weakness, but from overwhelming relief. They decided a final, Frank conversation was necessary. It was held on a Sunday morning at Catherine's home. Alex sat beside his mother, his face a cold mask. "I am not going to stand in your way," Catherine began. "But I need to know you've thought about the consequences. A life with a man 30 years your senior, with a past that has already hurt you." Clara nodded. "I have. Ma'am. I was so scared I wanted to give up. But then I realized the thing that hurts most isn't age or the past. It's when someone doesn't dare to hold your hand in public. Arthur dared to do that." Alex scoffed. Dared. Or was foolish enough to throw away his career for a young girl. For the first time, Clara looked directly at Alex. Not with resentment, but with clarity. "You made me lose my faith in love. But your father helped me find it again. He had the right to choose someone with less baggage. But he chose me. With all my scars. You don't get to mock his choice." Silence filled the room. Catherine set her teacup down, her voice softer now. "Are you truly ready?" Clara took a deep breath. "I don't know if we'll make it to the end of our lives together. But I know that if I don't take this step, I will regret it for the rest of my life." Catherine said no more. She simply looked at Arthur, who stood behind Clara, with the eyes of a woman who had loved, had lost, and had finally let go. The meeting ended without a single tear. That night, as they walked down their familiar street, Arthur asked, "Are you okay?" "I am," she said. "I feel light." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I don't need everyone to accept us. I just need you to not let go of my hand." Under the warm glow of the streetlights, they walked on. 3 months later, they were simply living. Every morning, Arthur would wake up early, make tea, and drive Clara to work on his vintage motorcycle. After her suspension, Clara decided not to return to the airline. She opened a small training center, teaching crisis management and flight safety to young attendants, a long-held dream. Arthur stood by her side, teaching classes for free, captivating students with his 30 years of experience. The gossip faded away, replaced by the quiet hum of two people living a good, hard-working life. One late night, as she was preparing a lecture, he brought her a cup of hot ginger tea. "I have a question," he said, one day, when I'm not so steady on my feet, and my hands shake. "Will you be annoyed?" Clara smiled, her voice catching. "I'm only afraid of the day I'm too old to watch you sleep peacefully. Just like this." He placed his hand over hers. "I want to marry you. No big party. No fancy dress. Just a small ceremony. You and me and our students. And a piece of paper that says I'm not just your lover, but your husband." The simplicity of it, the raw honesty after so much chaos, made her cry. "Yes," she sobbed. "On one condition. You have to promise to live a very long time. So I can have the tea you make for me every morning." The wedding was held on a late autumn afternoon in the community garden of the old building where they loved to walk. The bride wore an elegant, pale blue dress, her eyes shining. The groom, in a simple beige suit, trembled slightly as he pinned a flower to his lapel. At nearly 60 years old, it was the first time he had ever felt this nervous, and this sure. A young first officer, once Arthur's student, gave an emotional speech. "I used to think pilots were the bravest people in the world. But today, I see that Captain Vance is braver than any of us, because he dared to face the world to love someone with his whole heart." The biggest surprise came as the ceremony was ending. Alex appeared, standing quietly in a distant corner. Clara tensed. But Arthur simply looked at his son with the calm eyes of a father who had accepted that some bonds cannot be forced. Alex stood for a moment, then walked over. He nodded to them both and handed Clara a small envelope. "You don't have to read it now. It's just a few final words from someone who was wrong about a lot of things." With that, he turned and walked away. There was no awkward apology, just a final act of letting go. As Clara watched him leave, her heart felt light. That night, after the guests had gone, the new husband and wife sat on the steps of the old building, sipping tea. "I never expected Alex to come," he said quietly. "I think he needed to let go. Just like we did," she replied. Arthur took her hand. "Are you scared?" "No. Because in the end, I realized the most beautiful thing in the world isn't marrying someone rich or perfect, but marrying the person who dares to walk through the storm with you. Under the yellow streetlights, amidst the rustling of the last autumn leaves, two people separated by a generation sat together as if they were always meant to be. Their love needed no one's approval, for they had already proven it through a journey of struggle and forgiveness. Life after the wedding was exactly what they had hoped for: simple, quiet, and full. Their training center grew, and young students traveled from other states to learn from Clara and Arthur. Seeing the next generation of flight attendants look at him with such respect, Clara felt a simple joy, knowing the love they had nurtured was now blossoming for others. But it was then that the reality of age became more apparent. Arthur grew tired more easily. Once, while teaching, he suddenly swayed and nearly fell. The doctor's diagnosis was a collection of age-related ailments: poor circulation to the brain, degenerative disc disease in his neck, and unstable blood pressure. The conditions weren't critical, but they required him to avoid stress and overwork. A month later, he stepped back from teaching. In taking a temporary leave, he wrote in a letter to his students, "The lessons I needed to teach, I have taught. The lessons that can only be learned by living. You must now walk on your own." The burden fell on Clara's shoulders. She took on more corporate training projects to make ends meet, managing the center and caring for Arthur. Slowly burning out, she came home late one evening, exhausted and drenched in sweat, to find him asleep in his chair, a book fallen to the floor. She sank to the ground and wept like a child. "If only you were 10 years younger," she whispered. He opened his eyes, his voice tired but teasing. "If I were 10 years younger, I'd probably have other girls trying to steal me from you." She laughed through her tears and held him tight. The next morning, he left a letter on the table for her. "If one day I can no longer walk beside you, you must live as you did before you met me. Strong, with dignity, and always knowing how to love yourself. I am not afraid of dying. I am only afraid of leaving you alone." December brought with it a biting wind, and the darkest days of Clara's life. She was teaching an online class when a neighbor called. "Clara." Arthur collapsed on the balcony. "We're rushing him to Mount Sinai." Her hearing went numb. She grabbed a coat, abandoning the class mid-sentence. For the first time, she felt a fear so profound it stole her breath. By the time she arrived, he was in the emergency room. The doctor said he'd had a minor stroke. They had gotten him there in time to avoid the worst, but he would need close observation. She walked into his room and saw him lying still, his face gaunt. She sat down and clasped his hand. Her voice choked. "I haven't told you yet. I turned down the offer to be head of training at that big corporation. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here with you." Though his eyes were closed, his fingers twitched in her hand. All her career ambitions suddenly felt so small. The days that followed were a grueling journey of caring for him, teaching online from the hospital, and sleeping on a folding chair by his bed. Financial pressure began to mount. Sometimes she had to borrow money from friends. Sometimes she skipped lunch to afford the best nutritional supplements for him. Whenever he woke and tried to apologize, she would cut him off. "You are not allowed to apologize. You are only allowed to get better." One drizzly evening, dozing in the hallway, Clara received a text from Catherine. "Clara, I heard the news. If you need anything, do not hesitate to ask. Whatever happened in the past, you are family now." For the first time since their wedding, Clara broke down and sobbed. Not from despair, but from the knowledge that after all their struggles, their love had finally moved even the most guarded of hearts. 3 weeks later, Arthur was moved to a rehabilitation facility. Though out of critical danger, his left side remained weak, and he depended on a walker. The man who had once commanded jets across continents was now a patient, heavy with a sense of lost pride. Clara felt it keenly. After a long talk, they made a decision. She would reopen the center, not just for the money, but to give them both a sense of purpose again. Her life became a relentless cycle of effort. Mornings were for preparing his meals and checking his blood pressure. Afternoons were for teaching. Evenings were for helping him with physical therapy, massaging his limbs, and telling him stories about her students. Though exhausted, she felt her own spirit coming back to life. One day, while cleaning his desk, she found his old notebook. She opened it to an entry he had written before he got sick. If life forces you to choose, always choose yourself. Because only a woman who loves herself has the strength to love others, she cried. Not from sorrow, but from a profound sense of peace and understanding. Over time, Arthur slowly recovered. He could walk with a cane and began to join her online classes, offering feedback on the curriculum in a voice that was still raspy but full of passion. One day, he looked at her for a long time. I know my age doesn't allow me to make promises, but if you ever want to have children, and am no longer able. She smiled gently, cutting him off. You are not the father of my children, Arthur. You are the man who taught me how to be a mother. They both knew their love didn't need a child as proof. They were already a family. The following spring, Clara received stunning news. She had been awarded a 6-month advanced fellowship in aviation pedagogy in Sydney, Australia, an extremely rare opportunity. She read the acceptance letter over and over, her heart a tangled mess. 6 months wasn't a lifetime. But for a man recovering from a stroke, it was a long and challenging road to face alone. She said nothing that evening, but Arthur sensed it. What is it? He asked. She set her tea down. I was awarded a fellowship. In Sydney. For 6 months. The room fell silent. He looked at her for a long time. So what are you going to do? I haven't decided. She mumbled. I probably won't go. The center is just getting stable. And you haven't fully recovered. I can't bear to leave you alone. Arthur sighed, turning to look out the window. Clara, do you remember what I wrote to you? If you have to choose, choose yourself. I don't need you by my side, 24/7. I need you to live by the very principles you teach. I can take care of myself, but I cannot live with the feeling that you sacrificed your future for me. That would be more painful than any illness. She threw her arms around him, sobbing. You'd really let me go? I would, he said. As long as you promise to come back. In the weeks leading up to her flight, she prepared online lesson plans, hired a teaching assistant, and scheduled video calls with him for every night. The day she left, he insisted on seeing her off at the airport. In the departure lounge, he held her hand. It's only 6 months. I'll be waiting. He pressed a small, hand-carved wooden airplane into her palm. Keep this. So you'll always remember I'm waiting for you. As the plane took off, Clara sat by the window, clutching the small gift. She didn't know what lay ahead. But she knew one thing for sure. Only by daring to fly on her own wings would she have the strength to protect the love she cherished. And back at home, Arthur stood by his window with his cane, smiling at the sky. Go on and fly, Clara. When you land, I'll still be here. Your safest harbor. Summer in Sydney was humid and bright. Clara threw herself into the demanding academic schedule. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. Her nightly video calls with Arthur were her anchor. Seeing his loving face on the screen made all her fatigue melt away. In her 3rd week, a guest lecturer from the U.S. named David joined her class. He was around 35. Tall, funny, and a charismatic teacher. He took a special interest in Clara, often praising her sharp thinking. One day, he invited her and a small group for a barbecue at a professor's house. She initially declined but accepted so as not to seem distant. The party was fun and relaxed. When David found out she was married to a much older man, he couldn't hide his surprise. Really? Is such a large age gap common where you're from? Clara smiled faintly, her gaze steady. He may have retired from his job, but he has never retired from my heart. The answer silenced David, but a vague sense of guilt stirred within Clara. At the same time, back in New York, Arthur was beginning to feel weaker. One morning, he fell while watering plants on the balcony. He wasn't seriously hurt, but he decided to hide it from her. When a neighbor asked if he wanted her to call his wife, he just shook his head. Don't say anything. The girl is busy with her studies. That night, he sent her only a short text. Today I was cleaning the old bookshelf and found a letter you wrote when we first fell in love. After reading it, I wanted to write you another one. De la ban dich chofan kui kung va kung la hoi kade kwa kau chuyen. Clara received the text while in the middle of a study group session. She smiled. And then, unexpectedly, burst into tears. The wave of longing was overwhelming. She called him back immediately. But he didn't answer. Nearly half an hour later, he texted back, "Fell asleep. I'm okay. My love." But a woman's intuition told her he was hiding something. One cold, rainy afternoon in early June in New York, Arthur fell again. This time it was in the building's community garden, as he was trying to pick a few starfruits from a small tree she had always loved. The fall knocked him unconscious. In Sydney, Clara was preparing for her final presentation when she received a call from New York Presbyterian. "Are you the wife of patient Arthur Vance? Has in intensive care. His left arm is completely paralyzed, and he's at high risk for another stroke." Clara froze, the phone slipping from her hand. The next morning, she was at the airport. She had deferred her studies, leaving only a short note for the faculty board. "I have already learned the most important lesson. Not in a classroom, but in the realization that the person you love can be gone at any moment if you are not there to hold on." The overnight flight landed at JFK at 1 a.m. She took a taxi straight to the hospital. Seeing him lying unconscious behind the glass of the ICU, she broke down, pressing her hand to the window and whispering, "My love, I'm home. You are not allowed to leave before me." 3 days later, Arthur regained consciousness. Seeing her by his bed, her face gaunt, he asked weakly, You left your program?" "No," she said, her voice firm. "I didn't leave it. I just put it on hold to keep you here." He smiled, his eyes filling with tears. 2 weeks later, he was discharged for long-term home care. One afternoon, as they sat on the balcony, he said, "I'm not sure how much time I have left, but I want to use my savings to expand the center. I want to name it the Sail and the Wind. You are the sail, reaching for the vast ocean, and I will be the wind that quietly follows behind you." Clara turned to him, smiling through her own tears. "And what if one day, you become the rain? Then I will still fall towards you." Their story, once deemed unnatural, had become a small symbol of faith and devotion. People came to their classes not just to become flight attendants, but to hear them speak a story with no prince or princess. Just two ordinary people who dared to choose each other when no one else would. In September, the New York weather softened. Arthur's health weakened with the changing season. The doctors said his body was in a state of comprehensive decline. There was no pain, but there wasn't much time left. They both knew, but they never spoke of it. Instead, they lived each day as if it were their last together. Clara temporarily closed the center, moving all her classes online. She taught. She cared for him. And she continued her own deferred studies. One day, he called her over and placed a small wooden box in her hands. "These are the letters I've written you for the past year. If I go first, read one every week, as if I am still writing to you every night." She hugged him, sobbing. 3 days later, Clara received a confirmation letter. She had completed the International Fellowship with the highest distinction. The only student to ever defer and still achieve the top result. The honors ceremony was to be held at the New York Public Library. She declined all media interviews, asking only to bring one guest, her husband, Arthur Vance. On the day of the ceremony, she wore an elegant lavender dress and pushed Arthur's wheelchair. The entire hall fell silent as they entered. Not with shock, but with respect. When her name was called, the room rose in a standing ovation. She accepted the honorary degree. But when she turned back to the audience, she saw Arthur raising his hand to wave at her. His right hand trembled uncontrollably, but he held it high. She burst into tears. Not for the achievement, but because the person she loved most was still there in the front row, witnessing her success. That night, after the ceremony, he whispered, "I'm at peace now. You are strong enough to live well, even without me." "No," she interrupted. "I'm not stronger. I've just learned how to live a life that doesn't waste the lessons you taught me." He smiled, then murmured, "Clara, will it be sunny tomorrow afternoon?" "Yes. I think it will be beautiful." "Why do you ask?" "Because I want to sit on the balcony with you and watch the sunset one more time." The next morning, he did not wake up. He passed away in his sleep. A look of serene peace on his face. Clara didn't scream or wail. She just sat beside him, held his cold hand, kissed his cheek one last time, and whispered, "Thank you. For not promising to stay forever, but for staying until the very end." 1 month later, Clara was back at the center. She stood before her new students. "I once loved a man more than 30 years older than me," she began slowly. "We were unconventional, illogical, and unsupported. But it was he who taught me that gentleness is a woman's greatest strength. And that kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change a life." The entire class stood and applauded her. A year later, the Sail and the Wind had expanded into a community-focused training model, helping disadvantaged youth. The first scholarship from the Arthur Clara Fund was awarded to a young woman from a rural town who had lost both her parents. Clara continued to teach. She never remarried. But every day she wore the gray silk scarf Arthur had given her. One late autumn evening, she stepped onto her balcony with a cup of hot ginger tea. She opened the last letter from the wooden box. "When you read this, it means I am very far away. But don't be sad. Because as long as you continue to love, I will continue to exist." Clara placed a hand on her chest. "You know," she whispered to the quiet night, "I don't dream of flying in the sky anymore. I dream of being the one who holds the ladder for the young ones to climb. And every time I see one of them take flight, I see you somewhere, nodding and saying, 'You did good, Clara.'" A soft breeze swept through her hair, and somewhere, among the clouds, a man was surely still watching over her, just as he had from the very first day. Their story teaches us that happiness comes not from perfection, but from daily acts of kindness, forgiveness, and perseverance. And that love, when it is deep enough, needs no age, no explanation, only two sincere hearts. Thank you all for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Your support means the world to us.